Hey there, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Eleni Schirmer. You are with the Debt Collective, which has been doing great work on trying to cancel student loan debt, which was a promise made to a certain extent by this president. You're also a writer, teacher, organizer, and currently a research associate with the Future of Finance Initiative at UCLA's Luskin Institute on Inequality and Democracy. So all around badass. I wanted to start because the press conference President Biden did yesterday was pretty long, I think almost 2 hours. But at the end, a reporter asked him kind of simply, reminding him that he had vowed to cancel at least $10,000 in student loan debt. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
You campaigned on canceling $10,000 in student loans. Do you still plan to do so, and when? And then my second question is, now that you've clarified the Bull Connor comments, do you plan to reach out to Republicans like Mitt Romney to talk about reforming the Electoral Count Act?
Yes, I'm happy to speak out. I've met with I've talked to Mitt on other occasions, and by the way, I reached out to the minority leader as well at the time that he made his speech.
He answered a totally separate question and did not answer the question on student loans. I don't know. I don't know if after 2 hours he was kind of tired or if it was intentional, but at least campaigning, he specifically, I'm just reading from a tweet, had said things. Additionally, we should forgive a minimum of $10,000 per person for federal student loans, as proposed by Senator Warren. I could go down the list of things he has not followed through on, but I wanted to ask from your guys' point of view, you've been on the front lines, in large part, the Debt Collective and other groups were responsible for at least the pause and moratorium on repayment. What was your response to his non-response yesterday?
Well, the response to the non-response is it wasn't a no. So on the one hand, perhaps it's a sign of a small opening, and the other hand is he's on brand at that point. A non-response is pretty on brand for how his stance on this issue. The fact of the matter is that Biden has full authority. He could this afternoon pick up his pen and sign the executive order. The Debt Collective has, in consultation with some of the best lawyers on this issue, has drafted an executive order that would cancel all of the federal student debt. I mean, he doesn't need to go through Manchin. He doesn't need to go through Sinema. He could do this right now. And the question as to why he's not is, I think, one we should all be asking at a time when Build Back Better is being thwarted. This Voting Rights Act tragedy is going through. Why he's not doing what is literally in his full power to cancel student debt in the middle of a pandemic is, I think, that's an important question, and history is going to have a lot to say, whatever he decides to do on this.
Call me a cynical Susie here, but let me just throw this out there. I could be wrong. You know a lot more than I, but I do believe Wall Street and financial banks own a lot of this debt. And I'm pretty sure that those same Wall Street financiers fund a lot of Democratic Party politicians and Republicans, of course, too. So there seems to be a bit of a conflict here between, not that they own all the student loans, but a large portion of these are owned by Wall Street. Could that play a role why he's kind of not doing anything?
For this case, it's actually the federal government that owns these loans. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about this moment that we've seen right now is that under Donald Trump, the loans were paused. The federal government doesn't actually need the money from these loans. That's what the past 2+ years have shown us, is that they actually don't need the money from these loans. The federal government is not planning, even prior to the pandemic, before the pause, there was a vast majority of borrowers were in default. And so I think that just goes to show that there's really no reason for the government to turn the loans back on. They don't need the money. And even before they turned the loans on, put them on pause, people weren't paying them back. So I think, Wall Street absolutely is a player in here. And I think the whole issue of private student loans and the financialization of the loans that the federal government has certainly is a question. And we know that Biden, comes from he's a senator from Delaware, the credit card capital of America.
And I wanted to ask you also, because there's really been this push in the media, I think right now, like back to normal. Let's get back to normal. Well, I mean, if we got back to normal, let's say COVID wasn't a thing, hopefully that will be soon. Well, I mean, the normal is like, you're lucky to go to college for like 30, 40 grand at this point. Even state schools are really, really expensive now. And essentially, I mean, even the job market, they're crowing and bragging about, oh, I created this many jobs. If you look at the jobs that came back, a lot of them were in hospitality and other low wage, non-living wage industries. So I just think it's kind of at this point unsustainable, because if people are graduating, even people that are getting a master's degree, they can't get those great paying jobs that they're going to even be able to keep up with these loans or contribute to society economically in other ways. So it really seems unsustainable at this point. But
That's right.
I don't know, Biden, maybe the powers that be, they don't want to open this spigot of like forgiving things.
Yeah, that's at the debt collective, when sometimes people will say, well, if you cancel student debt, what about medical debt? You're going to just cancel that? Absolutely. Absolutely we are. There's absolutely next up. Nobody should be having to pay for the insult of not having enough money to do some of the basic things that are demanded of a flourishing society, like healthcare, like housing, like education. So I think, I'm totally on that train. The other thing that I wanted to say about, now I've lost the thread. You were saying something really interesting earlier, but,
that it was unsustainable. People can't, at a certain point, people can't pay this back.
They just can't pay it back. Yeah, exactly. They can't pay it back. And, there's all, from an economic point of view, that causes all kinds of other problems from just, it's actually sort of, there's one way you can look at debt, the high, intense levels of student debt that young people, middle-aged people, and elderly people are carrying right now. And it's on one hand bad for capitalism. I'm not a capitalist, but if I was, I would be concerned that people aren't able to sort of make the right capitalist moves, do other kinds of investments, buy homes, spend money, take vacations, do these kinds of things that are sort of good for the economy because of the debt loads that people are carrying. The other thing too is that I think you're hitting on something with student debt that's really in particular, is that this is a labor issue. This is the notion that this is a problem that just faces sort of 18 to 22-year-olds and it kind of cramps their avocado toast style or whatever is absolutely wrong. And it's as you said, there's plenty of people who are in their 60s and 70s and are having their Social Security checks garnished by their student debt payments, which is absolutely just an undignified crime against humanity. But it's a labor issue because the price of college has increased as wages have declined. So the question of, is it why college is becoming more expensive as workers are being paid less and less? There's becoming this big, huge problem. That's one of the reasons why the debt collective is really calling on labor unions to step up to join the fight for student debt cancellation. We're taking the position that, this is actually one thing that bosses and workers could be on the same side with. If bosses were to join the fight for student debt cancellation, it's literally a free way for them to make sure their workers have higher take-home pay. So this is a strategy we're seeing unions start to kind of come together to demand to pressure Biden to cancel student debt, because they know that that's a really easy way to increase people's take-home pay. And I think this is how we're going to win this fight, is when more people begin to realize this isn't just a problem facing sort of like a few carefree youth. It's crippling a society. Crushing a society, excuse me.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw a union in Massachusetts of 30,000 workers just called on the president to cancel student loan debt.
That's right. The Western Mass Labor Federation.
And I also see another element. I hope it doesn't come to this, but let's say in May, they let it lapse. You have to start repaying again. Then we have another variant down the road. We've already seen right now, to me, they kind of are instituting this let it rip, go back to work after 5 days. If you're sick, whatever. Well, if you have that extra knee on your neck that, I gotta pay $700 again a month, people are more likely, even if they're not feeling well with whatever, COVID, to just go back to work because I have to pay this.
That's right. I mean, and then add the midterms in there and it feels even crazier that right now we're living under Donald Trump's world with regards to student loan policy. I mean, Biden has just kind of provided short-term extensions of a policy that Donald Trump was the one who enacted. And so to reverse that policy months before a midterm is hard to sort of see what the long-term political strategy is there, other than a desire to surrender office.
And lastly, this is, I know you're not like a political consultant here, but is the Democratic Party interested in winning? Because I look at it like, all right, let's just say Biden is like a grandpa. I'm morally against, you made the decision to borrow this money. You need to pay it back, whatever. But wouldn't you think there's people around him being like, hey, we're bleeding under the age of 30? Like polls show they're really doing pretty bad under the age of 30. Obviously, Black people care about these loans too.
That's right.
They're bleeding across the board, independence, this and that.
Right.
And this is something pretty simple that they could do that could at least galvanize somewhat of a base.
That's right.
To come out for them.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Polling on student debt is showing that it's actually quite a popular program with Democrats and Republicans. And so, I think there's some real danger for Democrats should be very concerned. First, they should be concerned about people who are suffering under debt. But whether or not we can make that assumption or not, I don't know. But we know that they're concerned about keeping their jobs. And I think there's some real danger to imagine the world in which Republicans come to office and they are the ones that cancel student debt, and what kind of realignments that would cause in people's political affiliations, I think is an important question to have on the table, and people should be taken seriously.
And tell people more about the Debt Collective. How could they get involved? Where could they find your work?
Absolutely. So the Debt Collective is the nation's first union of debtors. We work on all kinds of debt. Student debt is just one of the sort of debt injustices that we're organizing around housing debt, medical debt, carceral debt. And this is not going to be won without people really in the street organizing for it. So the Debt Collective has an exciting strategy and really ready to organize with people. So I encourage people to come to our strategy session on Sunday and our day of action, and check out our Twitter for and Instagram and all that for the details on this.